Welcome back everyone to Ontario Cryptids. I hope all my American viewers had a fabulous 4th of July day yesterday and had some great times with family and friends. And for today, we have one heck of a story coming your way. Now, before we get to this amazing story, I would just like to thank all of you who continue to come back and listen to my stories and who continue to subscribe to my channel. I have received a wonderful notification from YouTube this past week stating that we have surpassed 100 subscribers. Thank you again to all of you for validating that you are enjoying the contents of this channel. By the way, before we do a deep dive into today's encounter story, I would like to add that I enjoy reading the comments you have written and would love to take some of you up on your request to do a hike together in the near future. I will be contacting you shortly to set up a date. Without further ado, let's get right into this story, so please go grab your favorite beverage and sit back and relax. All right, here's an exciting story that a subscriber named Rich sent me. Rich had contacted me months ago with the news that he was going to share his encounter story with me. Well, today is that day. Rich's encounter story adventure takes place in early spring of 2019, where he canoes 8 days down a river in Ontario, Canada. He also shares how and when he got interested in Sasquatch. Well, the time has come to type down my story, my interest, knowledge, my experience with them, the Sasquatch. It all started when I was 10 years old, watching TV with my dad, and guess what? It was the Patterson film. Yep, like many others, the Patterson film got me. It rang true in this little boy's heart. Even to the point, I wrote my public speaking assignment on Sasquatch. I came in second place, delivering that speech from memory and cue cards. A scary start to my interest in Sasquatch. So the years passed and I grew up out in the rugged outdoors with my younger brother by my side. Our love of nature waxed strong, going on long adventures into the countryside, catching turtles, fish, frogs, and snakes. Leading into adulthood, we continued our adventures, canoeing through Ontario's North Country on these 2-week trips. Even one lasted 2 months before we decided to call our ride out of there. Yes, my brother and I were free. The funny thing is, I wasn't looking for Sasquatch and I wasn't aware of what signs to look for. I probably walked right under their structures or an X or something. Then came along Colorado Bigfoot, Chris Carpenter, and the likes, where I learned about their signs and through all the testimonials, some of their behaviors bringing me to a whole new awareness. I've had a keen interest for 10 years now with the study of Sasquatch, a fascinating mystery that is starting to unravel. So here I was in my early 40s going from the internet into Short Hills Provincial Park outside of St. Catharines, following up a trucker's report of a 10-foot Sasquatch walking on a trail up 12 Mile Creek towards Short Hills Provincial Park on the Niagara Escarpment. Standing next to a tributary of 12 Mile Creek off trail with my then girlfriend. It was early spring and there was 6 inches of snow on the ground in the shadows of the escarpment. Next thing you know, I say to my girlfriend, "Here, get on my back, piggyback style." With her, it was usually get off my back, he. So she did, and I walked across the creek where no one would go, knee-deep in water with a stick in my hand. Well, sure enough, on the other side, we saw a huge white bare footprint in the snow, heading in a straight line a good 5 or 6 feet apart in stride, heading out of the creek also. We followed them for 100 yards where they led me to a 20-foot oval area where the snow and leaves were all brushed to one side, leaving the wet dirt exposed. The tracks went up the escarpment on a steep angle through the trees, much too difficult for us to follow. But now I have seen my first tracks, and I had the Sasquatch bug, so now I was always looking for any sign of them. Sometime in those years, a few miles away from Short Hills, I was hiking the Jordan Valley, which has a beautiful creek that comes over a tall falls, spilling down into a good-sized waterhole, where the salmon end up spawning, coming up the valley over water ledges to end up here. Quite a feat. Well, sure enough, I'm wide-eyed hiking the trail during a salmon run, and I look over a 5-foot bushy area, and from the trail about 15 feet away, I see an arm's-width relatively fresh tree break 8 feet from the ground with wilting leaves on it. So yes, of course, I step in and make my way through to it, and lo and behold, there was a worn, hardened, mudded-down trail coming from the forested escarpment abruptly ending at the tree break, not making it to the main trail. It looked like a hidden trail to the river marked with a tree break, too high and big for a man to make that tree snap over. I had my family with me and never followed that trail from that break. I wish I would have. These two small incidents I found added to my drive to see more. That comes later, so everywhere I went I was looking, more aware than ever of what to look for. And indeed, I felt sure that there were Sasquatches in Ontario, even in southern Ontario. I had read stories of sightings in Grisby, Hamilton, St. Catharines, Lewiston, New York, and all of the Niagara Escarpment, and I felt privy to it. So from here, I started going on solo canoeing and hiking trips into the wilds of Ontario further north. I spent 8 months living with the Algonquins north of North Bay. They very much know of Sasquatch up there, and I had a native fella tell me true blue that he saw a huge Sasquatch standing in the pine trees, looking at him menacingly, growling, when it swiped its open hand at an 8-inch diameter conifer, snapping it right over. He said he was so terrified that he wet himself, lost control, and couldn't move. It turned and left. These indigenous people up there are fully aware it's real, without a doubt. After my grand adventure with the Algonquins, where everybody called their friend chum, I love that and their good nature. I had solo hiking trips where there were large, so to speak, owl sounds and stick breaks and structures like X's and large footfalls where one time I had my head in a canoe, portaging, and just out of my vision 10 feet away to my side, I heard a huge ground vibrating footfalls. It kind of scared me, so I kept trekking to get my canoe in the water, where I canoed through a freshly beaver-dammed green-leafed forest. So surreal. This all culminates into my last solo canoeing expedition a year ago during the spring of 2019's high water flooding. It was a solo 170-kilometer, 8-day canoe trip from the beginning headwaters of the Arundel River near Wilberforce, leading into Burnt River near Kinmont, following down the Burnt River to its mouth near Fenwell Falls, where my trip ended. Almost a whole canoe trip is wilderness and rapids coming off the Canadian Shield, and it was very challenging, especially in the high flood stage waters. It was on this trip that I had 3 separate days that I noticed Sasquatch was around and near me. It was the last 3 days that was the most profound and frightening. So let me start from the beginning and get this off my chest. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to move into the Haliburton area, a beautiful wilderness and cottaging area I had connections to growing up. It wasn't long before I purchased a canoe, leaving behind our old family canoe, and started studying Google Maps, planning my next adventure. During this time, I was solo hiking alone, 2 to 7 hour winter hikes over wilderness rocky forested hills, recording all kinds of structures, X's and bends. Sometimes the ground felt hollow, and I would see vents melted through snow where the breath of a bear or something else was coming out. I saw a cave entrance blocked with a huge boulder too big for me to move and a huge X hanging directly over it on a place called Green Mountains near Guttaram. Well, this mountain had some stories to tell, as I would find out. Sure enough, I know of a story of a cattle farmer that saw a huge Sasquatch walking away carrying one of his calves over its shoulder, heading straight towards Green Mountain. I had seen in this area huge piles 6 feet wide by 2 feet of pine cone shells. Piles too big for a red squirrel. I knew a man who lived close to Green's Mountain and asked him if he had heard of any Sasquatch in the area. Even better, he came back at me with his own encounter. He said to me that it was nighttime when his girlfriend took the recycling outside around the corner of the house, and she stopped dead in her tracks, staring face to face less than 10 feet away into the eyes of an 8-foot huge red-haired Sasquatch. He said he went to check on her and found her frozen, unable to speak or move, looking at the Sasquatch. He told me he put his arms around her and carried her back into the house. I saw this guy again and asked him to tell me what he saw that night, and he relayed the exact same story without a blink of an eye. His story rang true to me and has the hallmarks on how some might react. So on I went to Google Maps, studying the contours of the land, seeing where the more remote areas are away from cottages and houses. I have found 5 areas all approximately 15 kilometers apart in the Haliburton-Guttaram area, where there are tree structures, stars, teepees, Sasquatch style, bends, arches, seats, and the X's marking the spots. I feel it's a family clan in each area. So here I go, spring has sprung, and there's record floodings, but no way anything is going to stop me from my carefully planned canoe trip. There I was, getting dropped off at the Arndale River on Haddington Road. As I watched the truck drive away, I immediately realized my life jacket and machete were still in the truck. Oh crap. No life jacket and only a buck knife for protection. My heartbeat accelerated, but I got into my canoe anyways and floated away in the river's wild splendor. That first day, I took a tributary that leads into Haddington Lake. Really rugged, wild-feeling country. I came back into the Arndale River, and the day was waning when I arrived at a spot where the old-growth forest came right down to the river's edge. I set my tent up after realizing there was an elaborate star structure 20 feet away, and a big X as well. Leaners on every big boulder in sight, with a huge double tree 2 feet away from my tent, where something could hide and the ground looked like something was standing there all flat, padded down. Great, I thought. I'm sleeping in a Sasquatch hunting hiding spot. So there I was, laying in my tent with darkness enveloping. Crack! I hear a stick break and then the sound of an owl. Whoop! Some more crackling and sticks and then another owl. Whoop! Then 2 owls back and forth with the sounds of something stepping on sticks. Whoop! Whoop! I then said a little prayer, fell asleep, and didn't wake up until daylight. Wow, what a sleep. And it felt like it was an hour and a half, not the whole night. I break camp and back on the river I go, without my life jacket, mind you, but I'm like an otter in the water, so I wasn't too worried. It was only at the rapids I got a little edgy. Sure enough, my only spill happened on a set of rapids that morning. A cold, very refreshing bath is how I looked at it. I lost my Quad Pro video camera out of my breast pocket. Crap. Oh yeah, did I tell ya? My friends thought I was going to die on this trip canoeing to high water levels. They really did. Well, that first spill sharpened me up quickly, and I ran several rapids much harder than the one that I spilt on. There is a place near High Falls where a tributary takes you around I will call it a mountain. I explored it up a ways where Google Maps shows there is a remote canyon that splits this mountain. It leads to a small lake. I made it to the entrance, and sure enough, a huge X stood at the mouth of the canyon, which made me feel that I shouldn't go in there. Maybe someday I can go back with someone and walk into that canyon. Okay, so I get into Gooderum, make a phone call, and get a life jacket and a machete from a completely different buddy nearby. Good, that makes me feel better. Oh yeah, when I was leaving my first campsite floating silently down the river around Oxbows, I heard an owl. Whoop! I get further down the river and I hear another owl. Whoop! Further down the river again and another owl. Whoop! So I quietly get over to the bank adjacent to where the owl sound was, and I hear something running away on 2 feet up through the forest. I knew it was in my mind, and I left it at that. That upper section felt really wild. I saw a deer and a moose next to me on the river. Water sounds don't register that I'm a man, so you can get close to wildlife. Those Sasquatches knew I was there, though. Okay, so leading up to my second last night, the 7th night, I canoed many rapids and many kilometers. I was now on the burnt river below Kintmont, where there is quite a large amount of vast areas of old-growth forest called the pines. This is where I found myself in the heart, setting up my camp on my 7th night amongst these big old trees. A primordial spooky world with moss hanging in the branches. I made a weaved rope platform to set my tent on, about 3 feet high, avoiding another night of sleeping on the ground. It's really comfy. It was the first night I didn't hang my pack 20 feet up on a rope. I stuck it up in a spruce tree about 7 feet up and then climbed into my tent. I'm laying there silently in the dark when all of a sudden I hear a loud howling across the river. I lay there listening and more howling. Then it morphed into the sound of a woman screaming. I have goosebumps and chills writing this, and it makes me cry tears. It then changed into another worldly, crackling, laughing, screaming, wild growling roar that was so loud I felt it in my chest. Then silence. I lay there absolutely frightened, not moving a muscle, just listening. Then within 5 minutes, I hear quiet, crunching, slow footsteps approaching only 20 feet from my tent. I hear a long, deep breath, and I know it's right outside of my tent door. I hear it lean in closer with its face breathing in as if to smell my fear. I lay there clenching my buck knife, saying a prayer. It then quietly shuffled around, and then I heard it no more. I eventually fell asleep exhausted from the adrenaline. I was relieved that I woke up the next morning and felt protected from God throughout the whole trip. One last note to add. As I grabbed my backpack from out of the spruce tree, a small round rock fell on my face from atop that pack. Strange indeed. I had so many questions for Rich, which he was kind enough to answer, so I'm going to include them right here. One of which was if he felt he was being followed all the way down the river, because that's how it seemed like to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and read his response, and I think you can pretty much surmise what my questions were. Rich writes, "Yes, I did think they were following me along the river. I had that feeling of being watched several times. I would scan the bank slowly floating by, looking intensely at the crest of the bank 10 or 15 feet away at my eye level. I thought they could be lying on their belly, peeking through the grass or plants at me. I was always looking for signs. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, this answer reminded me of seeing small bare human-like footprints, size 8 woman's feet, coming out of the woods onto the sand, going straight into the river. This was in the middle of the pine wilderness, far from any roads or cottages. It was also early spring, in 50-degree Fahrenheit, the trees just popping their leaves, and the water was cold. Very strange to see those tracks, especially since I was the first canoeist on the burnt river that spring. Now, as for what I was thinking, laying in my tent, feeling quite vulnerable and clenching the handle of my buck knife, I was very scared, but kept saying in my mind, Jesus, protect me. Jesus, protect me. I had experienced being protected throughout my life several times, so I did have confidence I would be protected, but still after hearing the howling and then those loud, blasting, otherworldly, horrific screams, laughing, crackling, roaring just across the river, and then the twigs breaking footsteps right after that, you bet I went to Jesus, and I'm not religious either. I was also holding that knife ready to use it in a Wolverine mode, trying my best to block out the fear. I have this thing inside me about being tough like a Wolverine. A native elder friend called me that one day, so from then on it pushes my envelope to block fear. When I first heard the howling, I thought it was just wolves hunting. I have had 2 wolves come onto my winter camp leaving their prints. The bigger of the 2 came a foot away from my head behind my tarp, snapping his teeth at me. I turned my crank radio on and my flashlight on, and they both bolted away, scared. With the howling on my canoe trip, once it changed into the other vocals, I knew it was Sasquatch. It was very scary but exciting because I was really making this trip to look for Sasquatches and their signs. It was hearing steps coming towards my tent that set off a spine-tingling, hair-raising, paralyzing fear that I fought off with faith and my Wolverine attitude. That's it, V. My Sasquatch quest continues. Rich, I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today and allowing us to experience what you did, but only in the comforts of our home. So thank you so much. And I can't imagine being suspended in a tent and having a Sasquatch pretty much breathing on you. That just, I don't know, I probably would have just fainted right there, right then and there. So thank you again so much for sharing this. I truly appreciate it. And also, I really enjoyed your artwork that you sent forth with your email, which you guys got a chance to see here in this video. Rich, I'd also like to thank you for the plugs that you've given Ontario Cryptids, this channel. I truly appreciate it. Again, thank you for sharing your story with us today. Well, that's a wrap for today. If you would like to share your encounter stories in a safe environment, please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. Your stories can be as anonymous as you would like. I'd love to hear from you soon. Bye for now, and we'll see you all next week.